Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the page, myself included, obviously. Uh, I stopped doing the Monday Night Raw recaps, honestly, just because I can't sit through that show in one sitting, or any of their other shows for the WWE. So I realized that's not something I love, so that's not going to be something I can put my best efforts to for you guys to view and enjoy or get anything out of. I realized I'm more in my niche or niche, however you want to pronounce it, when I'm more critical and overthinking of the product. I've been watching for 25 to 30 years, depending on how early I got started as a child, and there's a lot of things that bother me with televised professional wrestling within the United States. So I want to recap not really a top 10 things that I liked, maybe more so a bottom 10 things, things that displeased or annoyed or angered or anything like that. And we're going to be dubbing this the Weekend Rants. Now let's get started. At number 10 this week, it's from WWE's Monday Night Raw, and it's really just their booking as a whole. There isn't really anything too awful happening currently at this point, in my opinion. Uh, it's just really minute things and just the way things are handled or the way things are blended together. This week they had a moment of bliss segments where Alexa Bliss ends up in Randy Orton's arms, but then the Fiend shows up, and then he just hands Alexa Bliss over to Bray Wyatt, kind of like a baby or parcel, and it just came off very weird, and it felt a little off. Wasn't a terrible segment by any means, but it's just didn't really add anything other than camera time for the show. So eh. But I know that this can be done so much better, particularly with Randy Orton, particularly with the Fiend Bray Wyatt, particularly with Alexa Bliss. These are three characters individually, where when it comes to a promo or a segment, they usually do pretty well even on their own. And now the three of them come together, and it's a mediocre kind of segment. We also had a Symphony of Destruction match. I believe it's the third one they've ever done. If you've ever heard or seen or got the general gist from my facial reactions about cinematic matches, while the Symphony of Destruction is not a cinematic match, it's under the same premise. It's hokey, it's cartoony, it's something with way too much setup that doesn't have any sort of payoff to whatsoever. It's kind of thing to happen for the sake of happening kind of match. I don't like them. They're bad. The Symphony Destruction matches have all been bad. Again, like I said, I think this is the third one, 3 out of 3, where nothing's gonna come from this. It's just a themed, hardcore match, and particularly doesn't add anything extra with Jeff Hardy beating Elias, because Elias always loses feuds, and Jeff Hardy's not going to be climbing any further up the ladder. He's not going to win another world title, so there's just nothing to really come of this. It's needless and pointless, and it's kind of like the theme with a lot of things happening on Raw. Particularly the last thing I'll mention for Monday Night Raw, coming in at number 10 in this three-way tie here, is everything that's involving Lana. It just brings down Asuka and Shayna Baszler and even Nia Jax. It's not realistic. I know we have to suspend our disbelief in wrestling as it is, and we're going to touch on that more in a second. But nobody believes Lana is an adequate competitor where she can compete against, vicious women in the division like Nia Jax, like Shayna Baszler, like Asuka, uh, or even, the more talented ones that aren't as vicious, like even Peyton Royce. So to see such a limelight on Lana, but also her picking up wins, like this week she got a pinfall victory on Shayna Baszler, it's insulting and it's outrageous and it's ridiculous and it's just eye rolling, and it's again, my opinion, the exact opposite of what should be, at least, being portrayed in the ring on television. We want to see the best athletes, or at least the most charismatic of characters, or preferably both, but some combination of the two. And Lana's neither one. I don't really understand why she was ever there, outside the fact that her husband had a pretty interesting character when he was there, but now he's not there. Why is she still on television when people have been taken off the television for much less than not being able to do anything in the ring? You know what I mean? So, I don't know, kind of a bummer. She's not being put through tables anymore, so I'm not really getting anything out of it personally. But again, nothing on Raw on its own currently is too offensively bad. So rather is the sum of all of its parts that's the negative, and that's why those three get lumped together and for number 10. At number 9, Young Bucks promos. So we're going to talk about AEW's Dynamite from Wednesday. And the Bucks are just really bad at these, especially Matthew Jackson. It doesn't matter what the topic is or the opponents that the Young Bucks are addressing. In over 430 plus days that AEW has been on television, there has not been a single good Young Bucks promo. Type it into Google. I dare you. Google's going to give up guessing what you're trying to say way before you get to the word promo. It's not there. It doesn't exist because they can't do this well. And now that they have the tag team titles, for whatever reason, after beating FTR so quickly, completely separate point though, they have an excuse that they didn't even need to have more camera and promo time. And it just doesn't work. They should have a mouthpiece more so than FTR or anybody else in the division, because they need somebody that can talk. I couldn't really even tell you where they're going to go with their next feud. TH2 mixed it up with them. The Acclaimed, who just debuted on Dynamite recently from Dark, had an interaction with them. They fought Top Flight recently. It's the tag team division, for as many talented teams as they have, it's a jumbled mess right now. And you're only as strong as your weakest link or your leader. And the Young Bucks, just not really doing it. They are high spot attractions. That's about it. Nothing really worthy of investing in too much. Hopefully they'll drop the titles soon, though. Number 8, we have Natalya from Friday Night SmackDown. She picked up a win over the last SmackDown Women's Champion, Bayley. I don't understand why Natalya is picking up major wins against anybody in general. I understand Bayley has been off of her game since losing her title to Sasha Banks, and she has an upcoming feud with Bianca Belair that came into play this week and last week. But Natalya gains nothing from these big wins anymore. She's been around too long and has done nothing with them for them to matter. Natalya essentially is like the women's division's version of Dolph Ziggler. Sure, it's someone who's going to continue to get random, few and far between uh, title opportunities, but everyone knows that they're not going to win the title. It's a filler match to get over a particular hump of a month till we get to the following month and the following program against whomever, right? It's not a serious threat. This spot could have been much better utilized in any way, shape, or form, right? Uh, Someone like Ruby Riott, who could use a big time win, could have been put in this spot. Liv Morgan, who you seem to want to do something with a few different times, but you get cold feet or you just forget about her or whatever the case might be. But she's one of the latest victims of a start and stop push in the women's division. So Liv Morgan could have used a big time win. Even Billie Kay, who I'll admit, as much of an Iconics fan as I am or was, I was highly concerned for the future of Billie Kay because without Peyton Royce, I didn't see a future for Billie Kay. And I am extremely pleasantly surprised that they have found camera time and talking time and a gimmick for Billie Kay, and they're pushing her with it. They're giving her something to sink her teeth to, and it's coming out beautifully. And she's finding little nuanced ways to make it work, even if it's just on Talking Smack, which is, the day after the show. Apparently, I don't watch that. I just saw a YouTube highlight. But Billie Kay is somebody that you seem to at least care somewhat for. She couldn't have get the fluke victory here over Bayley, who could be distracted by Bianca at ringside. Also, it's something that you had the opportunity to go, okay, cool. We have this big time win for insert women's name here that they could put in their back pocket so we can use as a rationale for random title shot later on. Natalya doesn't need that. At this point, she gets title shots because she's been around 10 years or whatever it's been. She doesn't need big time wins, and it's not to be taken seriously when she does get big time wins because we all know nothing's coming of it. So, I don't know, kind of a miss there. But coming in at number 7 is something that's also a bit of a miss. It's Cameron Grimes on NXT over on the Wednesday show. Particularly him being so scared of Dexter Lumis. It's cheesy. It's corny. I get Lumis is, this weird character who stares at you and draws cartoon-like pictures of you and everybody that's around him. It's off-putting. I understand. He's not melting physically, or is a ghost, or is whatever other thing you should or could or would be afraid of. He's another guy. And you're both professional wrestlers, which means you know how to fight, and you've done so successfully because you got a pretty good win-loss record. Why are you literally scared out of your boots like it's a Saturday morning cartoon every time you see this guy? It just feels weird. It's very much oversold. It's without the physicality. It reminds me of Shawn Michaels selling for Hulk Hogan in a match, except we're doing it with acting and now without any physicality. It's a bit much, too much, and it makes them both look bad. Now, I think Lumis profiles better as a heel himself anyway. Again, my opinion. I'm not sure why he's a face, but regardless of that, Grimes, again, being too over the top cartoon like to play off of Lumis, I think something like this plays better with, granted, he can be a bit over the top himself, but like a Johnny Gargano, right? So a Kyle O'Reilly, right? these are things that we've seen, but it works well. Pat McAfee specifically, right? Which would be great for Dexter Lumis because there's no championship for him to go after. He doesn't have to lose to Pete Dunne. He doesn't have to find a tag team partner to take on Birch and Lorcan. He could just weird out, Pat McAfee himself, and whatever that leads to, it leads to. But at least it's not something that's going to go so over the top of ridiculousness. I don't know, just a thought. In terms of what Cameron Grimes can do, I'd have him stop talking altogether, go back to fighting, have him stomp the chest in on Kushida and then Tony Nese, and then whoever, Drake Maverick, whoever's laying around, just not really doing anything, build him back up, and then put him in a feud with Killian Dane, I guess, who's supposed to be a good guy somehow. But just do away with this. Another stipulation match like a strap match, it's just making everything worse. Now, in terms of making things even worse, coming in at number 6, we have the untouchable version of Carmella. And this pains me to say it because I like Carmella. I loved the Princess of Staten Island. I really liked Mella is Money, even though I completely hated the James Ellsworth aspect of it. Although I found their antics hilarious, but regardless. This one just feels off also because this doesn't feel like a Carmella, and it doesn't feel like an evolution of Carmella that we need to get adjusted to. This feels very specifically like a character written for somebody else, very different than Carmella, that they've stuck Carmella into, and they're like, I got nothing else for you, just go make it work, and I couldn't tell you how to make it work. It's on you to figure out how to make it work. It doesn't feel natural or comfortable. It feels forced. It's not convincing, and it really doesn't help where you have this forced, stuck up persona even more than your normal, but then you're mirroring off of the champion who is the most heelish face I think that company's ever seen, and not in an anti-hero way. Like, legitimately, Sasha Banks is a face with every heel quality and demeanor about her ever. It's just, like I said, it's a miss. The character feels like it's missing something, and anytime that you're forcing something to happen, it's just not going to come off very good, which is the case here. I can't wait for this feud to be over. Hopefully it's a 1 month and done kind of thing, and they're not going to drag this out several months. My 2 main picks of Bianca Belair and Bayley are kind of busy with each other now, so they can't really intertwine with these two, but just anything else. I don't know how, like we mentioned, Liv Morgan, Ruby Riots, Billie Kay, I don't know who else I can't think of, but there's other women around. Do something with one of them, get them thrown in, even if it's just to add to this. But this one-on-one dynamic between Carmella and Sasha Banks, it is a dud. Now, coming in at number 5, I've got the Mysterios. The Mysterio family, or conglomerate, or I'm not sure how we should refer to them now that they have not blood-related Buddy Murphy as a part of it. But regardless of how unlikely it always was, honestly, I was rather excited last week for seeing the Mysterio family ending up as heels. I mean, they were all very clearly cheating last week to help Buddy Murphy beat Baron Corbin in that match. It was very unlike their character. And yeah, technically Corbin would have come off as a face in that instance, and he would more than likely be awful as a face. But bigger picture here, the narrative of that feud that the Mysterios had with Seth Rollins, and then accepting Murphy into the family, and maybe Murphy was never a good guy completely to begin with, and has also corrupted the Mysterios' mindset, uh, via or not through Aaliyah, his girlfriend and Rey Mysterio's daughter, and Dominic's sister. Um, I thought that could have been much more interesting than seeing the Mysterios how they've been presented thus far, like a family from a novella. Doesn't make sense for how they acted last week, because in a match against Seth Rollins you can get away with that because they all hate that guy because they were at a very bitter war. Uh, but it doesn't explain why you're cheating to help recently accepted kind of uh, boyfriend of Aaliyah, Murphy, pick up a win with these heelish antics. And for the payoff of any sort to be that we're going to get some sort of faction, I guess we can call it the Forgotten Kingdom. I can't think of a better name, and they haven't said anything. In fact, they pretended that they didn't even notice who these guys were when they came to the ring at first in the first place. But a tandem, or a trio rather, of Wesley Blake and Steve Cutler and King Baron Corbin. I mean, sure, it gives Corbin something new, which he desperately needed, more so to get rid of the King gimmick. Uh, the Forgotten Sons, you want to bring them back on TV without Jackson Riker because he's ruffled a lot of feathers. But I don't see what this does. I don't see what this does at all. I'd imagine they'd have to be very different than how they were presented in the Forgotten Sons, like a complete character makeover with keeping the same name. But when Michael Cole is pretending he doesn't even recognize your face, despite the fact that you've only been missing from the show for a few months and you weren't wearing a mask, it's just reeks of the silly and hokiness and stupidity and illogic and plot holes that it's sure to have immediately. So that's why it gets number 5. Number 4, I'm probably going to catch some flack for, if any of you care to comment down below, but I'm going to list the NXT Women's Division. Look, I know SmackDown's division is not fantastic right now, and the one on Raw can't get out of its own way. And typically, NXT's version is a lot better and even gets a lot of praise currently. But hear me out. Ember Moon still comes off as the less dangerous main roster version of herself. So her grand return that she just made recently already feels like a complete waste. And Raquel Gonzalez, as much promise as she may or may not have, and as much as they clearly want to do something with her, she's still pretty green looking in the ring. So we're not quite there yet, and I don't think that she sees that next level that she can reach until that split and feud with Dakota Kai eventually happens. Speaking of green, though, for anyone out there who somehow doesn't understand this, Tru Heel Romeo, by the way, comes to mind. Shotzi Blackheart is not a star. She's colorful because she has green hair. That's it. That's all there is to her. She's not amazing in the ring, and she should not have a microphone in front of her almost ever. She doesn't add anything to the division or the brand or even the company, really, if we're going to be honest here. WWE already has someone colorful. Her name is Ruby Riott. And at the very least, Ruby can still carry herself well without the hair color. She can still compete in the ring significantly better than Shotzi Blackheart. I've heard Ruby talk. While I'm not wowed, it's a lot better than anything I've ever heard from Shotzi Blackheart, including Shotzi's promo about, well, tanks mean something to me because I have a military family and that's why I learned how to build and repair them or whatever. Um, Shotzi, from what she's presented to us on TV, I can't say the same. You know, she's, like I said, she's just a gimmick because she's colorful. Colorful's not a gimmick, right? It's just trying too hard. A gimmick's not talent. Shotzi should not be such a focus in this division, especially not when it still has Rhea Ripley or Io Shirai or Toni Storm, or to much lesser extents even Dakota Kai and Candice LeRae. There's a pecking order still in NXT, and Shotzi Blackheart should be significantly lower on it, like at least number 6. And that's assuming you don't want to put Raquel Gonzalez in front of her. That's assuming you don't want to bring the Robert Stone back and have Aaliyah in front of her. That's assuming that you don't sign somebody tomorrow and put them in NXT. Anyone that I might be forgetting even. So, there's no reason whatsoever why Shotzi should have been the unofficial spokesperson for 2 different NXT events at this point, when, honestly speaking, Shotzi Blackheart should be the one doing the jobbing for all these other women that I've mentioned in that division. She can be NXT Women's Dolph Ziggler if you really need some sort of a spotlight on her, where she has to be on TV every week. But instead of having Xia Li picking up loss after loss after loss, where she gets, abducted instead, just have Shotzi Blackheart lose a bunch of matches because she stinks. Problem solved. Number 3, though, in terms of people winning matches and getting focus and airtime when they shouldn't be. Number 3 is going to be just the entire concept of jobbers beating jobbers. Now, this is a weekly special on AEW's Dark on YouTube. Leva Bates and Red Velvet are going to get an honorable mention for this entry this week, and probably several weeks going forward. But there's no reason why Peter Avalon and Brandon Cutler and etc., people like that, are getting wins in their own squash matches. They are the jobbers. They should not have jobbers to put them over. They stink already themselves. The YouTube show is absurdly long at this point, and it's filled with tons of unnecessary content. I want to say garbage, but Cutler versus Avalon itself as a feud was mildly entertaining because the story of who's the worst jobber was kind of unique, and them finding different ways for neither man to pick up a win was indeed creative, but neither guy's going anywhere in that company or in wrestling in general. And they're not going to be a threat to anyone or any title. So why are we bloating the already longest weekly wrestling program with members of the Curtain Jerk Club? It's unnecessary, it's illogical, it's a complete waste. It serves nothing more than them being in the ring in whoever's tryout match, whatever local talent that you have losing to these guys. But that doesn't need to be on air on YouTube. Like, you have your own arena. I'm sure there's things that don't make it to air. I'd hope. I hope you're not putting every single thing you're doing in the ring whatsoever on the air. have these guys have their tryout matches or their dark matches and evaluate, if you want to sign guys like Ryzen or VSK or Danny Limelight or Jobber number 96. It doesn't need to be on YouTube, especially when the show is over 200 minutes long in the first place, consistently. Just get rid of a lot of that. Put the characters that you took the time to invest in to teach us that are active members of your roster, and particularly are jobbers on your roster, and just have them do those jobs. Cuts down on this show significantly, makes it a more concise viewing experience, so therefore a much more enjoyable viewing experience, where I want to see more of this program versus the complete horror and fear I have when I read a report that you want to take this particular show and essentially split it in half and make the other half even worse and more developmental. It's bad. Dark is a show for guys like Sean Spears because you can't find anything for him on Dynamite, and Scorpio Sky because you somehow can't figure out something not Nightmare Family related to do with him on Dynamite. That's what it's for. It's not for guys I've never heard of before having 7 losses 7 weeks in a row. That's not necessary. That doesn't need to be on TV. Occasionally, sure. Featured jobbers that aren't members of your roster that you're going to tell me are all elite at some point later on? No. For every Anthony Bowens and Max Caster that was jobbing and came out looking pretty awesome that became members of the roster after, there's a lot of hot garbage that doesn't need to be there. Coming in at number 2, we have everything that has to do with the whole Leon Ruff is a joke, but he's our secondary champion storyline on NXT. Look, I don't know Leon Ruff before NXT. I'm sure he's fantastically talented. I know what they've been presenting to us on TV, where he was at the Performance Center, and then he had a few tryout matches. I think he had a match on Raw, and then a match on NXT, and he was jobbed out completely. And then he finds himself in this match, and he wins the NXT North American Championship. This storyline's absolute trash. These storylines like this are always absolute trash. Either there's going to be a time where they want to present to us that Leon Ruff should be taken seriously, and we won't be able to because they've already trained us to laugh at and be annoyed by him, or he'll always be James Ellsworth or Barry Horowitz, and thus should have never been the champion in the first place. There's no, like, you can only go up. You can't. You can only go down when you pigeonhole yourself in situations like this. And similar to my Natalya argument from earlier on this list, there had to be anything else that you could have done to prolong the Damian Priest and Johnny Gargano feud. But if it was absolutely necessary for a third guy to get the rub of being a champion while this other story plays out, you still have guys on the roster that can be taken seriously after. Tell me why Austin Theory can't get that spot instead of being off of TV. Unless he's injured. I don't know. I haven't heard. Or Killian Dane instead of being stuck with this Drake Maverick tag team mess. He can get that rub because he's someone that you're always going to try to present seriously at some point. I mean, personally speaking, I think that belt would do tremendous help and wonders for Tony Nese. Tony Nese gets drafted out of 205 Live. I think he went to SmackDown. He ended up on NXT, and he's been doing nothing even on NXT. This guy's a former cruiserweight champion. At the time, he was one of the only 3 or 4 people that looked like they were worth anything on 205 Live. And I was super excited when he got the main roster call up. They did nothing with him. He ended up on NXT. I got even more excited because I went, oh, this is a place that will not screw up Tony Nese. Except they don't even use the guy, which is mind-blowing because he's jacked to the gills and he can fly all over the place. And if anything screams NXT, or what I knew of NXT used to be before it got put on USA, it was guys like Tony Nese. So I think he would have been a much better choice, personally. But anybody, really, besides Leon Ruff and all, 104 pounds of him. This whole thing, it's a miss as well. It makes me not want to see any of the 3 involved. I don't care about Leon Ruff. Can't wait for him to lose the belt. I hope he's destroyed. I hope they at least don't put him on TV for a long time after, if not ever. And if he never made it back to TV, I wouldn't be too surprised. But this also makes me not want to see anything to do with Johnny Gargano, who I don't overly love in the first place anyway. It doesn't make me want to see anything about Damian Priest, who I'm just starting to come around on because I find him a little bland at first when he first came to the company. But this, whole partying rock star thing that they're trying to give him, I can kind of get behind that, but with something this awful, number 2 on my list here for the week, all 3 of them can go away. Wrestlers need to disappear from television from time to time. Storylines like this, that's 3 one-way tickets off of TV, and I'll see you when I see you. My number 1 rant for this week is old wrestlers still being physical. Now, granted, SP3 for the Tru Heel Heat channel, you can find on YouTube, and you can find me there on their YouTube. But he offered up a serviceable suggestion that Sting can play an on-air authority-like figure in that kind of role. And I can see that working. Alright, so fair play. But I'm sorry if I don't want to see a 60-year-old Sting in a match that we know he's going to have, or a few of them. And I have been specifically not wanting this for about 15 years. Nostalgia is not that important. I don't understand why so many people get worked up on nostalgia. Is it cool when somebody pops up for a one-off? Sure. When JBL was doing commentary and then his music hit and they threw him in a Royal Rumble, kind of. I popped. It was awesome. It was great. Wasn't expecting it. Caught me off guard. Mick Foley shows up to debut the, let's call it, softcore title. I was like, all right, that title stinks, but that's cool. Mick Foley's the one to bring it out and present it instead of it just popping up. That's a cool moment. Sting popping up for a one-time appearance, let's say like that rumor where he was going to present the TNT Championship to, I guess, Cody. That would have been cool. Him showing up in full gear with his bats and them immediately announcing he has a long-term contract full-time. And he's going to get a match with Cody. Probably going to get a match with Dustin. He's inevitably going to get a match with Darby Allin. And that's three matches are off the top of my head without even trying. I don't want to see that. It doesn't make sense. He's 60 years old plus. He should not be anywhere near in the same condition or able to put up as much of a fight as these guys that are on their current everyday roster. And it gets more ridiculous when lifelong mid-carder and current old man Dustin Rhodes is competing and defeating members of this same roster. And even Arn Anderson this week is out there landing punches, and it all looks ridiculous. Okay? They're beating up people I'm supposed to take seriously, and I'm supposed to believe strikes fear in the hearts of whoever opponent that they're facing afterwards. And I don't, because why would I think you can beat whoever your opponent is when you let 4 or 5 punches land from Arn Anderson, or you took what they keep trying to tell us is a flipping pile driver from Dustin Rhodes? We already have to use the suspension of disbelief, as I've mentioned, when watching professional wrestling as it is. So we should be presenting as realistically as possible. Instead of Grandpa Arn and Dustin mixing it up with athletes in Team Taz, we also had Chris Jericho and Frankie Kazarian on the same show, which is only further emphasizing my point here. Okay? Jericho, by the way, shouldn't be wrestling singles matches on Dynamite. I understand he's going to have his, random main event, co-main event, semi-main event matches on the pay-per-view specials. It's fine. I don't love it. He's a big enough name in a company that doesn't really have any. And also, he's not 60 years old. I think he's like 50. Which is still a little too old for me. But he can still be serviceable, which I haven't seen from Dustin Rhodes in a long time, which I haven't seen from Sting in a long time, etc. Like I said, Jericho shouldn't be wrestling singles matches on Dynamite. He's just too slow at this point. Kazarian, honestly, Frankie Kazarian is too inconsequential on this roster to even be taking up a TV spot anymore. It's never seen before match. Yeah, great, for a reason. And at this point, it shouldn't have been. Jericho can be putting over anybody else. Kazarian, you put him on Dark if you want to push him, or keep him in tag matches or trio matches, but one-on-one with Jericho on your biggest show of the year, that's a miss, man. There's just too many other talents in this company. They have a bit too much, and too many of those talents are relegated to that 200-minute special that they put on YouTube called Dark, that they can get on Dynamite instead. So I don't know. That feels like a miss also. It's my biggest pet peeve when I see old wrestlers who just don't go away. They just want to keep chasing that adrenaline. Granted, I love Ric Flair and loved Ric Flair almost until the end. So, slight hypocrisy, slight exceptions to every pattern, but for the most part, that 61-year-old with spinal stenosis that got put to retirement from a buckle bomb on WrestleMania in his 4th match in a company that he probably never should have made it to, in his 4th match during that tenure that I didn't want to see out of 4. It's, I'm not as impressed of him selling the most t-shirts ever of all time on a website as a justification for him to have these matches on television. He sold merch, great, that's awesome. It's a cool looking shirt, honestly. I'm not mad at the shirt. I don't think it's a justification, though, to have these matches that we're going to have to sit through. Just my opinion. But those are my rants this weekend for the state of professional wrestling from November 30th through December 4th. leave some comments down below. I'm sure enough of you are going to disagree with parts of what I said, if not all of what I said. Feel free to let me know what you thought down there in the comment section. If you agreed with anything that I said to any extent, please also let me know that. I'd like to get this channel to a point where I'm reacting as well to comments and feedback that are down below. As always though, like, share, and subscribe. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you next week with more weekend rants.